You can't bring unauthorized substances on a plane, especially not with forged documents. The words landed like a slap. Loud, public, final. Then came the rip. It echoed louder than it should have. The kind of sound that turns heads. Lucía Estrella watched, frozen, as the flight attendant tore the folded prescription in half, then again into quarters, right in front of her. "This is not valid," the woman said, holding up the shredded paper like it was evidence in a criminal trial. Lucía didn't speak. Couldn't. Her throat locked. Her heart raced. She tried to breathe, but it felt like someone had kicked the air out of her lungs. The small gray pouch with her medication was still in her lap. For now. She looked over at her father. Miguel Estrella didn't stand, didn't raise his voice. He just looked the woman dead in the eye and said, in a tone cold enough to freeze water, "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." Earlier, 38 minutes before that moment, Lucía leaned her head against the window of seat 4A and watched the tarmac fade away below them. The clouds looked like distant continents from up here, quiet, soft, far away from the chemotherapy floors and the MRI machines and the months of gray ceilings. "Hey," she said softly, not turning. "You think I should have worn my hoodie instead of this stupid blazer?" Miguel chuckled beside her. "You look like you're about to lecture at Harvard." "That's not funny. It wasn't meant to be. You look sharp. You look like someone who's earned where she's going." She glanced down at her bag, touching the small insulated pouch with her fingertips. Inside were 4 syringes, each one carefully compounded and kept cold with medical-grade gel packs. That pouch was the reason she could walk upstairs now, the reason she didn't need the walker, the reason she could even board this plane at all. Stanford had invited her to tour their lab for pediatric oncology survivors, not as a patient, but as a future scientist. It felt surreal, almost fragile. Miguel knew that look in her eye. It was the same one she had before every PET scan, hope tangled with fear. "You packed the meds, right?" she asked. "I triple-checked the gel blocks this morning, still frozen when we got through TSA." She nodded. "Okay." Her fingers tightened around the strap of the pouch anyway. The flight attendants had started their routine down the aisle. 2 carts, 2 women. One of them, tall, tight blonde bun. Too much makeup for a morning flight. Had a face like she was already tired of the day. Her name tag read Claire. Miguel noticed how she snapped at an elderly man struggling with the seatbelt. How she rushed through the safety demo with robotic speed. And how she looked right through Lucía like she wasn't there. He didn't like that. 30 minutes into the flight, Lucía felt the warning signs in her knees first. Dull, pressing pain. It always started that way. Her body was sending the signal, now or you'll regret it. She leaned toward her dad. "I need my midday dose. It's starting." Miguel nodded immediately. "Okay, let's get water." He reached up, pressed the call button. Claire appeared moments later, arms crossed. "Yes? My daughter needs to take her medication. Could we please get a cup of water?" Claire glanced at Lucía, then at the pouch peeking out of the tote bag. "We'll be doing drinks shortly," she said curtly. "It's time-sensitive. We'd appreciate a cup now." With a theatrical sigh, Claire grabbed a plastic cup, poured from a bottle, and handed it to him like she was delivering a bill. "Thank you," Miguel said, still calm. Lucía unzipped the pouch slowly. The cool air slipped out in a foggy breath. She took one syringe out gently, her hands a little shaky. She'd done this dozens of times, but never at 35,000 feet. Claire took 2 steps down the aisle, then stopped. She turned. "What is that?" Lucía froze. "It's my medication." "Let me see that bag," Claire snapped. Miguel sat straighter. "It's a custom biologic, temperature sensitive. We have full documentation." "That's not what I asked," Claire said, stepping closer. "I need to inspect it." Miguel reached calmly into the seat pocket. "Here's the doctor's note. The TSA notification. Everything's cleared." But Claire didn't even glance at the papers. Her eyes were locked on Lucía like she was hiding something. Lucía clutched the pouch tighter. "You should have declared this when you boarded," Claire said louder, her voice cutting through the cabin. "We did," Miguel replied, sharper now. "You're not authorized to inspect it. Please call the lead attendant or the captain." Claire didn't move. Then, without warning, she reached down and snatched the pouch from Lucia's lap. "Hey!" Lucia gasped. "That has to stay cold." Miguel stood halfway. "Ma'am, I'll be taking this," Claire snapped. "This is a security concern now." Lucia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Miguel sat back down slowly, watching Claire walk toward the front galley, medication in hand. He didn't say anything. Not yet. Lucia was trembling. She just took it." Miguel reached for his phone, opened a secure app. AIMS. The system he helped build years ago to evaluate airline ethics compliance, originally designed for private medical charters. He clicked through 3 layers of access, selected the flight, then tapped Emergency Downgrade, Patient Risk, Level 3. Confirm? Yes. Notify all AIMS-affiliated partners immediately? Yes. It was done. Lucia hadn't seen it. She was still staring toward the galley curtain, where the woman who had ripped her future in half had vanished. Miguel looked out the window. Then he whispered, "Okay." Miguel Estrella had never known silence could be this loud. The hum of the engines, the occasional clink of an ice cube in someone's plastic cup, the faint rustle of a newspaper from the man across the aisle. All of it felt wrong now, dissonant, like background noise in a room where something sacred had just been destroyed. Lucia hadn't said a word since Claire vanished into the galley with the pouch. She just stared at her lap, lips parted, her body stiff like she was bracing for an impact that had already come. Miguel leaned toward her gently. "Lucia," he said softly. Her eyes didn't move, but a tear slid down one cheek. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're not done yet." She turned to him, finally. Her face was pale, eyes wide. "That was my entire schedule," she said. "I don't even know how I'd get a new prescription. It took a week last time." Miguel nodded. "I know." "And it has to stay cold," she added. "That stuff can't be left out." "I know," he repeated. She looked like she wanted to say something else but couldn't decide what. Instead, she reached for his hand, and he let her hold on. 12 rows ahead, beyond the curtain, Claire stood stiffly in the galley, clutching the pouch like it might explode. The lead flight attendant, a dark-haired woman named Dana with crow's feet and a weary expression, was already waiting. Her posture suggested she had dealt with enough mid-air nonsense to last a lifetime, but this was new. "I need to dispose of this," Claire said flatly. Dana blinked. "Dispose of what?" Claire held up the pouch. "Passenger in 4A had this. Claimed it was medication. No label, no proof, no refrigeration standard. I tore up the paper they tried to hand me. Could have been fake. For all I know, it's fentanyl or insulin being smuggled. Either way, undeclared liquids." Dana hesitated. "Did you verify anything before confiscating it?" Claire's voice sharpened. "I followed protocol. Safety comes first. I've dealt with this before." Without waiting for permission, she turned toward the trash chute, the secure, sealed unit used for disposal of hazardous materials. Dana reached out too late. "Claire!" Click. The hatch opened. Claire dropped the pouch inside, closed it, and pressed the disposal seal. Thud. The soft metallic clunk sounded final. Dana just stared at her. "You didn't verify anything," she said. "You didn't call me. You didn't check the TSA card. If this is a medical item..." "He was aggressive," Claire cut in. "Didn't let me finish." Dana exhaled slowly. "I'm calling the captain." Back in 4A, Lucia was trembling. Miguel reached across her tray table and opened his phone again. Not AIMS this time. Email, text threads. He scrolled through an old contact list, searching by initials. SG. He tapped the number and typed one line. "Need confirmation. Level 3 downgrade has taken effect. Track reinsurance status on AV332. He didn't hit send yet. He wanted to wait until the airline took their next step. Give them the chance to make it right. But he knew they wouldn't. 10 minutes later, the captain's voice came on the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're currently evaluating a minor issue and have been instructed to divert as a precaution. We'll be making a stop in Denver for technical review and passenger service adjustments. We appreciate your patience and cooperation. The reaction in the cabin was immediate. Murmurs, groans, phones unlocked. People calculating missed connections and rebooking headaches. Lucia looked up at her dad, alarmed. Did you do that? Miguel didn't smile. I'm going to get your medicine back, sweetheart, or something better. But we're landing because of us? He looked at her directly. We're landing because someone made a very bad decision, and now they have to live with it. She didn't say anything, but her grip on his hand didn't loosen. 25 rows behind, a woman in her 20s with fuchsia hair and a phone grip shaped like a flamingo had been filming for the past 3 minutes. She whispered to her camera, "This flight is going down in history. Stay tuned." Her username, @JusticeJessa. Inside the cockpit, the captain was furiously flipping through protocol binders while the co-pilot handled communications. The lead flight attendant stood beside him, holding a paper towel like it might catch the fallout. "You're saying she threw out verified medicine?" the captain asked, incredulous. Dana nodded. "And the passenger showed documentation?" "Yes." Claire tore it up. The captain rubbed his temples. "Why would she?" "She said it looked suspicious," Dana muttered. "It was in a cold pack. She assumed it was fake." The captain leaned back, muttering, "Jesus, we've already been flagged," Dana added quietly. "The ethics system, the one they use for hospital flight coordination, I think that man is someone important." "How important?" Dana hesitated. "I don't know, but he wasn't panicked. He was calm, like he knew this would catch up." 30 minutes later, the plane touched down in Denver. The landing was smooth, but the mood in the cabin was not. The seatbelt light stayed on longer than usual. No one moved. Then came the captain's voice again. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the passengers in row 4A and 4B, please remain seated. Medical personnel and airline representatives will be boarding shortly. All other passengers may disembark in an orderly fashion." And just like that, the stares began. First curiosity, then frustration, then blame. Lucia sank deeper into her seat. "They all think this is my fault." Miguel didn't correct her. He knew what it looked like, but he also knew what was about to happen next. He reached for her hand again. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "You were just the one they tried to silence." As the passengers filed out, one man paused near their row. Middle-aged, rumpled suit, briefcase in one hand. He looked down at Lucia, then at Miguel. "I saw what she did," he said softly. "I'm an attorney. I've dealt with ADA compliance. She didn't follow any protocol. If you need anything, here." He handed Miguel a card. Miguel glanced at it. Robert K. Pinsky, Disability Law and Compliance. He nodded. "Thank you." The man walked on. A few rows behind, @JusticeJessa raised her phone one last time and spoke into the lens. "And just so we're clear, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a girl with cancer meds, a power-tripping flight attendant, and now a $900 million mistake." As the last passenger stepped off, 2 paramedics boarded with a medical officer from the airport. Right behind them, 2 Ascendair executives in Navy suits. And Claire. Lucia's body tensed the moment she saw her. Miguel stood. The executive spoke first. "Mr. Estrella, I'm Daniel Keating, Director of Customer Operations. We're very sorry for the inconvenience." Miguel cut him off. "Is my daughter's medication recoverable?" Keating hesitated. "Unfortunately, no. It was disposed of through a sealed chute." Miguel nodded once. Then he pulled up the message he hadn't sent earlier and hit send. "Then we're done talking." Claire Thornton had never seen an executive look that pale before. They were standing in the corner of the jet bridge, just out of sight of the remaining passengers. Her arms were folded across her chest, but the confidence she normally wore like a pressed uniform was unraveling, thread by thread. Daniel Keating, Ascendair's director of passenger operations, was on the phone. His jaw was clenched so tight Claire could see the pulse in his temple. "I understand," he said into the receiver. "We're looking into it now." "Yes, sir. Immediate internal review. I'll brief legal next." Click. He didn't even look at Claire when he spoke. "Do you have any idea who that man is?" Claire blinked. "He's some angry parent trying to fake medical needs to get special treatment. I followed the handbook." Keating finally turned, and his voice was quiet, deadly quiet. "He's not some angry parent. He's Miguel Estrella." "Okay," Claire said slowly. "Is that supposed to mean something?" Keating took a deep breath. "Do you remember Ames?" Claire frowned. "The ethics system for medical flights?" "It's not just for private charters anymore," Keating said. "It expanded during COVID, integrated with 5 of our primary insurance backers, 3 major hospital networks. The FAA uses it to issue special clearance waivers for passengers traveling with medical gear." Claire blinked. "So?" Keating stepped closer. "Miguel Estrella co-founded it. He's the one who signs off on final scores." The air shifted. The floor didn't move, but Claire's balance did. "He's not just a doctor," Keating continued. "He's the guy who designed the damn system we're now flagged on. The reason the reinsurance notices are coming in, the reason the FAA has already scheduled a compliance review for next week." "I didn't," she started. "You didn't care," Keating snapped. "You didn't verify. You didn't call your lead. You tore up his documentation in front of half the first-class cabin. You took meds from a recovering cancer patient and dumped them like trash." Claire's mouth went dry. Keating's voice dropped lower. "And now? 3 hospital networks have already frozen their transport contracts with us. One of our insurers has flagged us for breach of ethical protocol. And if you don't believe me, check your phone." Claire slowly reached into her jacket, pulled out her device, and tapped open the Ascendair internal app. The AME score for Ascendair, normally in the green, was now red. Risk Level 3. Severe ethics violation. Patient safety. Below that, in bold, filed by M. Estrella, Physician Ethics Authority. Her hand trembled. For the first time in years. Meanwhile, in the medical bay of Denver International Airport, Lucía Estrella sat quietly on the edge of an exam bed while a paramedic named Ellie took her vitals. Miguel stood near the wall, arms crossed, watching. "She's stable," Ellie said, "but heart rate's elevated, likely stress." Lucía didn't look at either of them. She was staring at the floor, still visibly shaken. "It's not just stress," Miguel said. "That medication is what kept her system from flaring. The inflammation comes fast without it. It's not hours, it's minutes. We need alternative dosing, now." "We've called the University of Colorado Hospital," Ellie said. "Their rheumatology team is on standby. A private medical transport is being arranged." Lucía looked up at that. "Private?" Miguel gave her a small nod. "They're going to pay for every inch of that ride." She said nothing, but she squeezed his hand when he reached for hers. Back on the concourse, the dominoes were falling fast. At Ascendair headquarters in Chicago, the legal team was scrambling to review a 3:17 p.m. email that had just arrived from the FAA. Subject: temporary hold on Class C. Medical waivers for Ascendair. Due to an active ethics downgrade under AMS Protocol 4B, Ascendair is no longer eligible for expedited clearance involving medically dependent passengers until further review. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It meant no more transporting transplant patients, cancer survivors, or any passengers requiring in-flight medical accommodations, which meant hospitals wouldn't book, patients wouldn't fly, funding partners would pull out, and once those dominoes tipped, it was over. Keating had just received another call when Miguel returned from the med bay, his daughter now with the transport team. They stood in the corner of the concourse. No crowd, no cameras, just a quiet standoff between the man who broke the system and the man who tried to control it. Keating tried to stay professional. "Mr. Estrella, Dr. Estrella, we are deeply sorry for what happened today. I'm personally overseeing a full investigation." Miguel just looked at him. "I'd like to extend a formal..." "You're not going to extend anything," Miguel interrupted calmly. "Not until I've spoken." Keating's mouth shut. "You know what you did wrong?" Miguel asked. Keating hesitated. "We failed to follow verification protocol." "No," Miguel said. "You failed to hire people who understand human beings. You gave someone a uniform and no understanding of what it means to carry power. And because of that, my daughter almost had her health reversed in front of a plane full of strangers, quietly, like it didn't matter." Keating opened his mouth again. "I've already seen the downgrade on your system," Miguel continued. "That's not a threat. That's already done. What comes next depends on you." He handed Keating a small card. It wasn't a business card. It was a printed QR code. "Scan that. It's the Lucía Protocol. I wrote it 9 years ago. It was shelved. Too expensive, they said. Too idealistic. But now, you're going to implement it. Because if you don't, every ethics partner we work with will know you refused a solution when you had the chance." Keating swallowed. "Is this a legal demand?" Miguel shook his head. "No. This is your last chance to get ahead of the story. Because in 24 hours, a girl named Lucía will become the face of how Ascend treats young patients. And your investors, your board, will be screaming for someone's head." Keating didn't respond, not right away. Then finally, with a shallow nod, he said, "I'll scan it." Outside the airport, Lucía sat in the back of the private medical van, watching Denver roll past through the tinted windows. She was exhausted, but not just from the day. From being the girl who always had to be strong, who had to smile through needle sticks and "you're so brave" speeches, who had to explain, again and again, that cancer wasn't a personality. Now, she wasn't smiling. She was watching her father talk softly on the phone, probably to another administrator or agency or ethics board. She leaned her head against the glass. "I didn't even do anything," she said. Miguel looked at her. "You didn't have to," he said. "They did everything wrong. That was enough." She blinked slowly. "I just wanted to go to Stanford." "And you will," he said. She didn't answer, but she believed him. Justice Jessa wasn't a big TikToker. She was a pediatric nurse from Salt Lake City, on a layover to Denver. Seat 4B, right behind the girl with the soft eyes and the quiet pain. She didn't film to stir drama. She filmed because something in that girl's face, the way she held that small gray pouch like it held her life, made Jessa's hands tremble. She never expected a single video to ground a major airline, freeze $960 million in medical contracts, and spark a federal ethics overhaul. It all started with a look. Video, 1 minute 32 seconds, posted by @JusticeJessa. The angle's a little shaky, the lighting's uneven, but what it captured was crystal clear. Lucía Estrella sits quietly in seat 4A, holding her temperature-sensitive medication. Across from her, the flight attendant, Claire, is standing, arms crossed, voice clipped. "You can't bring unauthorized substances on board." Then comes the rip, audible, sharp, as Claire tears Lucía's folded prescription into pieces. Lucía doesn't shout. She doesn't argue. She just watches, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. Miguel Estrella, calm as stone, says only one thing: "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." At the end, as Claire storms off with the medication in hand, Miguel glances out the window and mutters, "Okay, that's enough now." That line hit like a match. Within 2 hours of landing, the video had over 120,000 views. The hashtag LucíaDidNothing flooded TikTok and Twitter. She didn't yell. She just watched them destroy her meds. Imagine watching your child's treatment get ripped apart mid-air. He warned them. He didn't threaten. He warned. A Yale ethics professor reposted the clip with a chilling caption: "I know Miguel Estrella. If he says you made a mistake, your entire compliance department is already obsolete." Within 6 hours, Stand with Lucía hit national trending. The airline said nothing. They thought it would pass. They didn't know a second video, filmed from row 5C, would surface that evening. This one showed Lucia quietly whispering, "Please don't," as Claire yanked the pouch from her lap. No violence, no screaming. But America saw everything it needed to. 2:00 a.m. Ascend Air Headquarters Crisis Mode. David Lyman, CEO, stared at the screen. "Maybe we say it was incomplete training," one PR rep offered. "No," the legal director cut in. "That's not the problem. The videos are complete. That's the problem." Then the compliance officer entered the room and laid a single page on the table. FAA had just sent notice. Ascend Air's medical priority status suspended. All patient transport contracts under review. Partner hospitals beginning withdrawal. $960 million in bundled contracts frozen indefinitely. Silence. Then a whisper. "We're already done." Meanwhile, in a quiet hotel near the airport, Lucia sat cross-legged on her bed, still in her blazer, awake, staring at nothing. Miguel made her a cup of honey tea, not because she'd drink it, but because it gave his hand something to do. "I know it's going viral," she said softly. He nodded. "It is. I've read every comment. I don't want to be someone's campaign." "You're not," he replied gently. "They're not asking you to speak. They're just listening now, really listening." Lucia looked down, then whispered, "How far will you go with this?" Miguel didn't flinch. "As far as you want me to." By morning, the news had exploded. CNN, MSNBC, NYT. Every outlet ran it. A headline from the Washington Post went viral on its own. "The girl who said nothing and changed everything." Justice Jessa was interviewed live. What made this go viral? Her answer? Quiet, sharp. It wasn't the powerful dad. It wasn't the policy. It was the silence. She said nothing and made everyone feel something. Across town, FAA headquarters, Emergency Ethics Response Committee in session. "Do we move forward with Lucía Protocol?" someone asked. "It's expensive," one member replied, "and it requires full training across 3 sectors." But then a retired Army physician, now FAA ethics chair, spoke. "So is a funeral. So is chemo. So is failing a child in front of a nation." No one argued. Back at the hotel, Lucia scrolled through her phone, blinking back the weight of it all. Then a ping. New email. Subject: Invitation from Stanford Pediatric Innovation Lab. "We're sorry for what you endured, but after watching your quiet strength, we'd like to offer you an honorary research fellowship. Not because you're a victim, because you're a mirror. And we needed to look at ourselves." Lucia put the phone down. Miguel stepped into the room, jacket over his arm. "You ready to head out?" She took a breath, then smiled for the first time in 24 hours. "I am now." 9:32 a.m. EST, FAA headquarters, Washington, D.C. Nobody was sitting. The emergency ethics response team stood in silence, watching 3 screens. One live-streamed Capitol Hill. One showed Ascend Air's falling stock. The third displayed the preliminary draft of the new industry protocol. Ellen Brooks, head of aviation ethics for the FAA, broke the silence. "We've officially lost public confidence. The Lucía Protocol is no longer optional." At NASDAQ, the crash was already in motion. A red ticker scrolled across the monitors. FAA suspends Ascend Air's medical priority status pending federal investigation. In just under 2 hours, Ascend Air's stock plummeted 27%. Over $640 million in value wiped out. 3 major healthcare systems froze their contracts. 2 pension funds dumped their shares. A coalition of ESG investors issued a joint statement to the SEC. "We no longer consider Ascend Air compliant with ethical passenger treatment standards." This wasn't a PR crisis anymore. It was a collapse of trust. Ascend Air HQ, 38th floor boardroom. David Lyman, the CEO, read the FAA's official notice on screen. Mandatory compliance with Lucía Protocol within 10 days. Non-compliance equals permanent suspension of all federal transport contracts. Nobody asked where Claire was. She had been suspended without pay. An internal ethics review was now being conducted under FAA oversight. One PR advisor nervously suggested, "Maybe we issue another apology statement." The legal director didn't even look up. This isn't about forgiveness anymore. It's about the price of ignoring basic human dignity, and we're paying in full. Meanwhile, across the country in Portland, Lucía walked quietly into her AP biology class. No camera crews, no statements, just a girl returning to class. The room fell silent. Then, one by one, students stood. They didn't clap, they didn't cheer, they just stood. A quiet acknowledgement of something deeper than fame. A Korean-American girl whispered beside her, "You didn't ask for this, huh?" Lucía nodded softly. The girl smiled. "Still, we needed it." FAA hearing room, C-SPAN. Live stream, full attendance. Public eyes on every move. The committee chair opened with the now viral video of Claire tearing the prescription from Lucía's hands. Ellen Brooks stepped forward, voice steady. "We can't legislate empathy, but we can mandate consequences when it's absent." She held up a printed document, 32 pages. The Lucía Protocol, a new national standard for medical ethics in aviation. Mandatory cabin ethics training for all flight crews. Immediate reporting and independent review of any denied medical request. One senator asked, "This came from Miguel Estrella's team?" Brooks nodded. "Yes, he offered it at no cost, on one condition. No one profits from what happened to his daughter. In a secure facility in Austin, Texas." Miguel Estrella stood in a control room with engineers reviewing the AIMS update rollout. Real-time reporting tools, independent cabin ethics alerts, automatic escalation of denied treatment cases to FAA and hospital partners. One junior analyst asked, "Aren't you afraid of lawsuits from the airline?" Miguel didn't flinch. "Let them sue me. If they want to go after the guy who stopped them from hurting someone else, that's a story I can live with." 5 days after the incident, CNN breaking segment. Lucía Protocol, a quiet revolution in aviation? The anchor explained. Initial rollout in JFK, LAX, Atlanta, O'Hare, and Denver. All ethics violations to be logged in a federal system. Passenger dignity now tracked alongside safety metrics. The segment ended with this quote, "Saying sorry isn't enough anymore. Now airlines have to prove they know why they're sorry." That night at home, Lucía sat at her desk, typing an essay titled, "When Silence Speaks Louder Than Words." Miguel entered quietly, setting a box beside her. Inside, the first printed copy of the FAA-approved Lucía Protocol. On the bottom, a gold-stamped line read, "In recognition of human dignity, FAA Ethics Charter, July 2025. Lucía ran her fingers across the cover, speechless. Miguel smiled, then said, "We'll hang this in every airport that joins. Let them remember the girl who changed the rules without ever raising her voice." It was supposed to be just another Tuesday, but by 10 o'clock a.m., the entire aviation industry was watching one room. Not a courtroom, not Congress. A quiet conference center in Arlington, Virginia. No banners, no press wall. Just a long table, 12 microphones, and a single phrase on the digital backdrop. Lucía Protocol, National Signing Ceremony. And the first to enter wasn't a politician. It was a teenage girl in a soft blue blouse and jeans. Lucía Estrella. She didn't speak. She just sat in the front row, next to her father. The FAA hadn't planned for this moment to go viral, but someone from CNN snapped a picture at just the right time. Lucía seated quietly, her father beside her, hands folded. The caption took over the internet within an hour. She rewrote the rules by saying nothing. By noon, it was trending in 38 countries. At 10:32 a.m., FAA Chair Ellen Brooks stood at the podium. No notes, no teleprompter. Today is not about punishment. It's about acknowledgement. That silence can be an alarm. That watching someone suffer quietly should feel louder than shouting. She turned slightly, gesturing to Lucía. Because of her, what we ignored is now written into federal law. Then she invited the first airline CEO to step forward. 12 major airline CEOs signed the Lucía Protocol that day. Each signature added another layer of commitment. real-time ethics dashboards at major airports, mandatory medical de-escalation training, independent response teams for passenger rights violations. But something unexpected happened after the fifth signature. A woman in the crowd, a former flight attendant, now an ethics consultant, stood and asked, "What happens if a company refuses to follow it?" Ellen Brooks didn't hesitate. They lose access to FAA-managed passenger corridors. No corridor, no boarding, no airline. The room went silent. The message was clear. This wasn't optional anymore. Back in Portland, Lucia's class watched the live stream during third period. No one talked. Even the loudest kid, the one who always made jokes, sat with his hands clasped. At the end, their teacher, Mrs. Bannon, clicked pause and said softly, "That's what change looks like. Not fire and fury, just quiet, with consequences." At 4:00 p.m., after the ceremony, a press conference began. But instead of the usual parade of talking heads, the FAA surprised everyone. They handed the mic to Miguel Estrella. He stood, calm as ever, in a charcoal blazer, took a breath, then spoke. "My daughter didn't ask to become a protocol. She didn't yell. She didn't sue. She just endured something that should have never happened." He looked directly into the cameras. "This protocol isn't about her. It's about all the people who didn't go viral, the passengers who were humiliated quietly, who didn't have a father who could build systems." He paused. "Let this document be the last time we need one. Let it be a mirror, not a weapon." The room was still. Then a reporter asked the only question anyone really wanted answered. "Mr. Estrella, are you done now?" Miguel gave a half smile. "When the last child can board a plane without fear, then I'll be done." The next morning, the New York Times ran the headline, "The father who didn't burn it down, he rewired it instead." It became one of their most read pieces that month. Meanwhile, FAA analytics showed something unprecedented. Passenger Trust Index up 21%, complaint volume down 34% in airlines that signed early. 5 regional carriers requested early enrollment in the Lucía Protocol. Change was already happening. And it wasn't forced, it was earned. Days later, in Denver International Airport, the first Lucía wall went up. A digital display, installed near gate C-47, with one simple quote from Lucía herself. "It's not about being right. It's about being treated like you belong." Beneath it, a plaque, dedicated to every passenger who stayed quiet and deserved better. Travelers stopped. They read. Some cried. A 6-year-old girl pointed at Lucia's picture and said, "She looks like me." Her mother nodded. That's the point. Behind the scenes, the ripple effects went deeper. Medical providers began adding protocol certification to their transportation contracts. Hospital systems flagged airlines that hadn't signed as ethics incomplete. A Canadian carrier, not even under FAA jurisdiction, adopted the system voluntarily. And then came the moment nobody expected. Claire, the former flight attendant, released a statement. It wasn't an apology. It was something stranger, more human. "I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. I thought I was following procedure, but maybe the procedure was broken." She ended with a line that surprised everyone. "If Lucía will have me, I'd like to train under the new system. Not because I deserve it, but because someone has to help make sure no one like her goes through that again." The public's reaction was mixed, but Miguel's wasn't. He forwarded the message to the FAA with one line. "If she's serious, let her start in Denver." 1 week later, Lucía got an email. Subject line, "You've been chosen." A youth innovation program in DC wanted her to co-design educational modules for the protocol rollout. She stared at the screen for a long time, then wrote back, "Yes, I'll help, but only if we listen to other teens too. Some of us have been watching quietly for a long time, and we've got things to say." The first time Lucía walked into the Department of Education's Pilot Center in DC, she didn't look like a guest of honor. No name badge, no blazer, just a gray hoodie and a backpack slung over one shoulder. She wasn't there for attention. She was there to listen. At least, that's what she thought. Until someone handed her a schedule, and her name was at the top of the agenda. Lucía Estrella, Youth Panel Lead, Passenger Dignity Curriculum Project. Her hands trembled for a second. She hadn't asked for any of this, but somewhere inside, she knew. It wasn't just about her anymore. The room they gave her wasn't fancy. No marble floors or fancy branding. Just a conference space in a repurposed library, now the hub for ethics education testing. She looked around and saw them. A girl from Memphis who'd once been forced to throw away her asthma inhaler by TSA. A boy from Minnesota who missed his transplant appointment because a boarding agent didn't believe his priority status. A non-verbal teen from New Jersey who'd been labeled uncooperative by a gate crew. They all had one thing in common. No one believed them when it mattered. And now they were here, not as victims, but as co-creators. Lucía didn't want to lead. She just wanted to make sure no one else felt voiceless again. She stood up and said the simplest thing. We don't need adult words. We need real ones. Tell me what should have happened in your story, not what did. The room came alive. For the first time, some of them cried. Others didn't. But all of them talked. And someone finally listened. By week 2, the FAA had flown in educators, tech designers, and ethics advisors. The goal? Build the first passenger ethics training curriculum co-authored by youth. Not just for airlines, but for schools, airports, and medical responders. Lucía's group called it the first 5 minutes, because that's when it all goes right, or terribly wrong. One afternoon, as they reviewed sample scripts for training videos, Miguel quietly entered the room. He didn't say much, just watched his daughter lead a session with a group twice her age. Later, as they walked to grab coffee, he smiled. You used to hate speaking in front of the class? Lucía shrugged. I still do, but this isn't the same. He nodded. No, this is bigger. Meanwhile, pushback had begun, quietly but aggressively. An airline lobbying group in Texas filed a legal motion claiming the Lucía Protocol created unrealistic expectations and unfunded mandates. A think tank released a statement calling it emotion-driven overreach. News pundits began debating it on air. Why should a teenager be shaping federal policy? Is this activism or regulatory chaos? She didn't even say anything. What gives her the right? But those arguments backfired. Each attack drew more public support for the protocol. Each insult made Lucía's silence more powerful. As one Twitter user wrote, if she can't speak, and you're still threatened, maybe the silence is saying more than you are. By month's end, over 20 school districts across the country piloted the Passenger Dignity module in health and civics classes. Teachers reported something they hadn't expected. Students were engaging emotionally. They weren't arguing, they were reflecting. They were seeing themselves in the stories. One middle schooler in Kansas said, I thought this was just about airplanes, but it's actually about how adults treat us, everywhere. Lucía, meanwhile, became more visible, even though she never sought it. She declined all interviews, turned down 2 documentary deals, refused a sponsorship offer from a major tech firm. But she made one appearance, a surprise visit to a school in Atlanta piloting her curriculum. When the principal asked if she wanted to give a speech, she shook her head. Instead, she just walked into the 7th grade class, sat in the back, and listened. After the lesson ended, a girl raised her hand and asked, Were you really the one they talked about, the girl with the medicine? Lucía nodded once. Another student, a boy with a stutter, said, That was messed up, but you didn't get mad, you just fixed it. Lucía smiled for the first time that day. I didn't fix it, but maybe I helped make it harder to ignore next time. In late October, the Department of Transportation held a national student town hall, the first of its kind. Lucía was invited as a special guest. She didn't speak first. She listened, as dozens of teens told their own stories. Then she stood up, took the mic, and said one sentence. This protocol will only work if people who've been ignored are the ones helping enforce it. The room clapped, but Lucía wasn't interested in applause. She stepped down and handed the mic to a 12-year-old girl with cerebral palsy. The message was clear. This wasn't about legacy. It was about access. Behind the scenes, something else began to shift. 3 major airlines, previously neutral, requested direct consultation with the student group. 2 airport security firms asked to license the empathy training module, and one of the airlines that initially pushed back, its CEO quietly contacted Miguel and said, "We were wrong. Can we still sign?" Miguel replied with just one sentence, "Only if you let the kids train your board." They agreed. One final twist came on the last day of the pilot program. Each student in Lucia's team was asked to write one sentence, just one, that would be permanently engraved into the final document. Most wrote things like, "Everyone deserves to be heard." Silence doesn't mean consent. Dignity before procedure. Lucia paused before writing hers, then handed it in. A week later, the FAA revealed the final version of the national curriculum. And under the section titled, "Why This Exists," was Lucia's sentence. "We thought silence was the problem, but it was actually the warning." It started on a Friday afternoon. Lucia had just finished her 3rd ethics review call with the new advisory team. She was exhausted, emotionally more than physically. She slipped her phone into her sweatshirt pocket and headed out the back exit of the Department of Education building. For the first time in days, she planned to be just a normal teenager. No press, no meetings, just boba tea and a walk home. But the text came in before she reached the street corner. "You seeing this?" It was from Avery, one of the curriculum co-designers. Lucia didn't answer, just clicked the link. A 12-second clip was already circulating. The caption, "Sick kid denied boarding. Staff laughs at her." The clip showed a girl with a nasal cannula and a trembling hand trying to hand over a medical note. The gate agent pushed it back, shook her head, and said something no one could fully hear, but everyone understood. "This isn't a hospital." And then came the laughter. The clip had no context, no beginning, no end, but it didn't need one. By the time Lucia sat down on a bench near the metro, the video had 7.1 million views. The girl in the video was named Naomi Hart. Age, 13. Diagnosis, primary pulmonary hypertension. She had been trying to fly from Phoenix to Baltimore for an experimental treatment. Her mother had all the proper documentation. The airline, unfortunately, had a new trainee at the gate, one who had not been trained on the Lucía Protocol yet. The girl was denied boarding. Her oxygen tank was removed from the cart, and they were rebooked for the next day. But the trial window closed in 6 hours. They missed it. By Sunday morning, hashtags were trending worldwide. Naomi deserved better. Lucía Protocol, now /believe disabled kids journalists began connecting it back to Lucia's story. Some blamed the airline. Some blamed the FAA. Some, unfairly, blamed Lucia. "Wasn't this supposed to be fixed?" one headline read. She scrolled through the noise in silence. Some tweets defended her. "She's a teen. She can't fix a whole system overnight." Others were brutal. "Symbolic change isn't real change." By noon, reporters were calling. Miguel had to turn off the house phone. Lucia didn't cry, not because she wasn't hurt, but because it felt familiar. The silence after something awful. The expectation to speak. But what would she even say? Naomi's story was devastating, raw, and real. And it wasn't hers to narrate. That night, a private Zoom call was set up between Naomi's family, Lucia, and an FAA official. Lucia stayed muted most of the call. She watched Naomi, pale, soft-voiced, but sharp. The girl didn't want an apology. She wanted a question answered. "Why did your protocol let that woman laugh at me?" Lucia stared into the screen. Miguel moved to speak, but Lucia raised her hand gently, stopping him. Then, unmuted. It didn't let her. It failed to reach her. Naomi blinked. Lucia continued. "We wrote something strong, but paper doesn't protect people. People do. And somewhere between Phoenix and Baltimore, someone decided that your life wasn't urgent enough. That's not the protocol's fault. That's a person choosing not to care. There was a long silence. Then Naomi whispered, "So what do we do now?" The next morning, Lucía sent an open letter to every airline CEO in the country. It had no PR spin, no legal jargon, just a header. If it fails one, it fails everyone. She listed 3 immediate demands: full deployment of Lucía Protocol Phase 2, mandatory medical dignity training for all gate agents, not just flight crews, direct youth oversight board, composed of students with lived medical experience, formal acknowledgement of Naomi Hart's treatment delay, with full financial reparations and a published apology. Miguel reviewed it and said one thing: "You don't have to carry this." Lucía looked up. "I already am." 48 hours later, 5 major airlines issued public statements. 4 accepted the terms. 1 pushed back, claiming it was not their gate and outside training scope. That airline CEO received over 300,000 emails in 24 hours. The company's ethics score, now public via AMS, dropped below compliance. By Friday, they reversed course and signed. A week later, Lucía gave her first public appearance since the incident. Not on camera, but in front of 200 high school students at a town hall in Maryland. She took no podium, just stood on the gym floor and said, "We didn't write the Lucía Protocol to be perfect. We wrote it because imperfect systems kept making the same mistake, not believing kids when they needed help the most. Naomi reminded us, we can't relax. Not yet." She paused. "This isn't about my name. It's about hers." The FAA responded swiftly. Protocol Phase 2 was fast-tracked for all carriers. A new public dashboard allowed passengers to view ethics compliance by airport and gate. And the AMS score system was expanded to include gate-level metrics, a direct result of Naomi's case. But perhaps the most powerful change. Naomi herself was invited to serve as co-author on the new Gate Grace module, training gate agents in emotional accountability. When Lucía heard, she smiled. That's how the system should work, not by erasing what went wrong, but by letting the right people help rebuild it. That weekend, Naomi posted a single video. No music, no effects, just her and a simple sentence. "I'm not just a story. I'm still here, and I'm helping fix it." It went viral. But this time, the attention felt different. Not sympathy, respect. The invitation arrived embossed in navy and gold, with the seal of the International Passenger Ethics Consortium stamped at the bottom. Lucía stared at it for a long minute. Miguel raised an eyebrow. "Another panel?" She shook her head. "Geneva, main stage, 400 people, and they want us to present." Miguel blinked. "Us?" Lucía turned the card around. On the back was a handwritten note. "We request your presence and your voice, and Naomi Hart's, if she is willing. Chairwoman Isabelle Lemaire." It was the first time Naomi had ever left the country. The flight to Switzerland was long, and her oxygen setup required special handling. But she didn't complain. She didn't say much at all. Instead, she held the Gate Grace training manual she'd helped write like it was armor. Lucía noticed her hands trembling as they landed. "You okay?" Naomi gave a tight smile. "Just wondering how many of them are going to roll their eyes when they see 2 American girls standing up there." Lucía nodded. "Probably all of them." Then, after a pause, "Let's give them a reason to stop." The summit was held at a modern conference center near Lake Geneva. Inside, polished diplomats, corporate execs, heads of ethics committees, and private airline owners from 27 countries. The air smelled of espresso, expensive perfume, and ego. Lucía and Naomi were the youngest in the building by at least 2 decades. Their slot? Day 2, 10:30 a.m. Future of passenger protection, beyond compliance. The first morning was tough. Lucía watched as speaker after speaker defended why regional differences made universal passenger dignity impossible. Our airlines serve rural territories, too small for formal training. Medical exemptions slow down operations. If we acknowledge emotional harm, we open the door to lawsuits. By the time they reached lunch, Naomi whispered, "They don't care." Lucía looked at her. "Not yet." Later that afternoon, a delegate from a large Middle Eastern carrier challenged the relevance of the Lucía Protocol entirely. "With respect," he said, voice formal, "your system is rooted in emotional triggers, not operational logic. Air travel cannot be run on feelings." Lucía didn't respond, but Naomi stood. The moderator glanced at the program, surprised. "I don't see your name on the speaking list." Naomi didn't flinch. "You will." And then she walked to the front. She stood silently at the podium for 7 seconds, long enough for whispers to start. Then she pulled out a printed photo, the still image of her crying at the gate from the viral clip. "This is me. This was real. And it cost me a clinical trial slot that might have extended my life." The room shifted. No one moved. Naomi's voice was soft, but steady. "You keep calling this emotional. I call it operational failure with human consequences." She held up the Gate Grace module. "This isn't about feelings. It's about predictable patterns of harm and preventing them. You don't need to agree with us, but you do need to stop pretending this doesn't happen." When Naomi finished, there was no applause, but something better happened. Silence. A heavy, tense kind of silence. Then Isabelle Lemaire stood, the chairwoman of the consortium, and addressed the room. "I move that we vote to recognize the Lucía Protocol and Gate Grace module as recommended baseline standards for all GPEC-partnered carriers." Gasps followed. One delegate from Canada seconded. A third, from Japan, requested a brief caucus. An hour later, 19 out of 27 countries voted yes. Lucía didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because one of the holdouts was the Transatlantic Carrier Alliance, TACA, representing 5 major airlines across the UK, France, Germany, Belgium, and Spain. TACA's lead director, a silver-haired man named Gerard Van Roo, requested a closed-door discussion. Miguel, who had accompanied Lucía, was barred from entry. "This one's yours," he whispered. "They're not scared of fathers, but they are scared of daughters who don't flinch." Inside the room, Van Roo spoke first. "Miss Estrella, we sympathize with your experience, but this is business. Training like this takes resources. We've seen your dashboards. And frankly, European carriers already outperform American ones on dignity scores." Lucía didn't blink. "Then why are your ethics scores trending down in the IMC's system?" Van Roo shifted. "Because that system is biased toward US compliance codes." Naomi stepped in. "AIMS doesn't care where you're based. It cares how people are treated. You think this is about America versus Europe. It's not. It's about whether we admit that passengers, especially young, disabled, or sick ones, deserve better." Then Lucía leaned forward. "You said this is business. But you've already lost $470 million in ESG-linked investment capital since ethics scores went public. Guess what all of those firms now require for airline partners?" She paused. "Lucía Protocol compliance. We didn't ask for that. Investors did." Van Roo was silent. "So you can delay, or you can lead. Either way, the system's changing, with or without you." The next morning, Van Roo stood before the full consortium and shocked the room. "TACA will adopt the Lucía Protocol and Gate Grace module by Q2 next year." He didn't look happy, but he looked convinced. Lucía didn't smile, but Naomi did, just a little. As the delegates began to disperse, Isabelle Lemaire pulled Lucía aside. "I've been in this industry for 35 years. I've never seen a room full of executives go quiet like that." Lucía just nodded. "Sometimes silence is the loudest thing we've got." That night, as they flew back to the US, Lucía looked out the plane window. Below her, the clouds looked soft, forgiving. Naomi sat beside her, headphones in, reviewing training clips they planned to update. Miguel, across the aisle, dozed lightly. And for the first time in months, Lucía allowed herself to exhale. Not because it was over, but because it was beginning to work. Lucía didn't see it coming. The email landed quietly in her inbox late Tuesday night. No subject line, no name. Just a PDF attachment titled, "Do Not Ignore." At first, she almost deleted it, assuming spam or some conspiracy theory. But something about the timing made her pause. Ever since the Geneva summit, the air around her had shifted. Publicly, everything looked golden. The Lucía Protocol was being adopted globally. Airlines were pledging compliance. Dignity scores were rising, but privately, things felt off. The numbers in the AMIS system didn't match her own live data dashboards anymore. Some carriers that had scored B- just weeks ago were suddenly scoring A+ without any evidence of training completion. Lucía opened the file, and then everything changed. It was a 42-page internal report, anonymous but authenticated. Title: Ethics Compliance Fabrication Across GPEC-Linked Carriers. It listed 8 major airlines, 3 based in Europe, 2 in the US, 1 in the Middle East, 2 global. All of them had something in common. They were manually uploading forged compliance data into the ethics system, faking completion of Lucía Protocol modules. There were screenshots of back-end panels, login histories, proof of internal memos saying things like, "Submit fake numbers to boost AM's score by 20% before investor audit." One memo even used the phrase, "Let's not let some sick teenager hold our stock price hostage." Lucía felt like she'd been punched in the gut. She forwarded the file to Miguel. Within minutes, he was pacing their small living room in jeans and socks, cursing under his breath in Spanish. "They're not just lying, they're laundering ethics," he said. "They want the benefits of your name, without actually doing the work." Lucía sat silently. Miguel looked over. "What do you want to do?" She didn't answer right away, because part of her, the exhausted part, wanted to stay quiet. Let someone else deal with it. She'd already spent almost a year carrying this weight. The thought of dragging her name through another storm made her stomach turn, but then she remembered Naomi, and the oxygen tank, and the laughter at the gate, and that one line in the leaked memo, "Let's not let some sick teenager hold our stock price hostage." That teenager was her. The next morning she called Isabelle Lemaire. The head of the Passenger Ethics Consortium answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting. Lucía didn't waste time. "Someone's forging compliance to boost AMS scores, 8 carriers, possibly more." Isabelle was quiet. Then, "Send me the file." Lucía did. 10 minutes later, Isabelle called back. "We'll launch a confidential audit immediately, but Lucía, if you go public with this, there will be backlash. These are powerful companies." Lucía took a breath. "What happens if I don't?" Later that day, she met Naomi at their usual study spot, a quiet tea cafe with backroom booths and soft jazz. Naomi skimmed the report in silence. Her mouth tightened. She didn't say, "I told you so," but Lucía saw it in her eyes. Naomi finally looked up. "They're stealing your name. They're branding themselves with your face, but they're still hurting kids." Lucía nodded. "If we go public, it could derail the whole rollout. People might lose faith in the entire system." Naomi leaned forward. "If we don't, it makes us complicit." The next morning, Lucía logged onto her blog, which she hadn't used in months, and typed a single headline: "This is not what we fought for." The post was raw, honest, direct. She didn't name the airlines, didn't share the files, but she confirmed ethics fraud had occurred. The system was being manipulated. And if passengers didn't stay loud, the reform would be nothing but a marketing campaign. She ended with one line: "Dignity only works when no one gets to fake it." Within 48 hours, the story broke across CNN, Reuters, and BBC. The #dignity laundering hashtag trended for a week. Investors began pulling inquiries. Ethics audits were demanded at every level, and one CEO, from a major US carrier, resigned live on air, calling it a betrayal of trust. Isabelle Lemaire held a press conference from Brussels. We will not allow the Lucía Protocol to become a PR stunt. Any carrier found falsifying compliance will be suspended from all GPEC partnerships, effective immediately. 3 airlines were banned within a week. And as for Lucía, the backlash came swiftly. Commentators on cable news said she was too young, too emotional. Corporate whisperers called her a liability. One airline exec even called her a nuisance with a laptop. Lucía didn't respond. She just kept going. 2 weeks later, she received a handwritten card in the mail. It was from a 9-year-old boy in South Dakota who used a wheelchair. Inside was a crayon drawing of a plane and a message in wobbly handwriting. I saw you on TV. My mom says you're why they gave me a ramp now. I think you're braver than Iron Man. Lucía folded the card, smiled softly, and slid it into her desk drawer, next to Naomi's gate grace notes and a worn copy of the original Lucía Protocol. She whispered to herself, "That's why we do it." The marble floors of the International Ethics Assembly building in Brussels echoed beneath Lucía's shoes as she walked the hallway toward the chamber. This wasn't like the Geneva summit. This was formal. This was historic. And the weight of it hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Miguel sat in the front row. Naomi was next to him, flipping nervously through her notes. Lucía paused at the door, took a slow breath, and stepped into the room. The chamber was filled with delegates from 38 countries, 2 U.S. senators, and ethics executives from every major airline coalition on the planet. The chairwoman adjusted her mic and spoke with crisp clarity. We now invite Lucía Estrella to address the Assembly regarding the future of international dignity compliance in aviation. Lucía stepped up. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack. My name is Lucía Estrella. I'm not a politician. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a girl who got sick on a plane and watched the world pretend it didn't happen. A few in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, but no one looked away. What happened to me was not rare. What happened after, the denial, the cover-up, the fake compliance, that wasn't rare either. What's rare is truth and follow-through. She held up a copy of the original Lucía Protocol, pages slightly bent, edges worn. This document started as a tool to prevent pain. Now, people are using it to perform compassion instead of practicing it. She paused and glanced at Naomi, who gave her the smallest nod. That's why I'm asking this assembly to ratify an update, a global amendment, something that requires not just training, but accountability. She clicked the remote, and a new screen appeared. The Estrella Standards, a 3-tier ethics enforcement model. Tier 1, annual third-party ethics audits, mandatory publication of compliance scores. Tier 2, real-time feedback systems for passengers, accessible mid-flight. Tier 3, whistleblower protection for both crew and passengers, backed by the consortium. There were murmurs across the room. Lucía finished. These are not radical ideas. They're the bare minimum for any system that claims to respect the people who depend on it. Then she stepped back, and she didn't say another word. The vote wasn't immediate. There were objections, debates, closed-door discussions. Some thought the standards were too strict. Others said they'd cost too much. A few worried about public backlash if scores went live, but the momentum had already shifted. Lucía's words and Naomi's story had traveled too far to be ignored now. That night, just past midnight, the Assembly made its decision. The Estrella Standards passed, unanimously. A reporter whispered, "That's never happened before." 2 weeks later, Lucía sat in a quiet press room in D.C., preparing for her final public appearance. A journalist asked the question she'd been expecting. "What's next for you, Lucía?" She smiled, tired, but at peace. "Nothing public. I've done my part. It's someone else's turn now." That someone was standing backstage. Naomi, holding a fresh copy of the Estrella Standards binder with her name now listed as Director of Passenger Ethics Training, North America region. Before leaving, Lucía walked the long corridor behind the press room, where airline CEOs were now quietly arriving for their compliance briefings. She passed one who had once called her a liability. He stood, nodded at her respectfully, and opened the door for her. Lucia didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She just walked through without flinching. Outside, a small group of passengers stood holding signs. One read, "Dignity is not a luxury." Another held a worn boarding pass with the words, "I still remember the day they didn't believe me." Lucia walked past them slowly, then turned back. She reached into her satchel, pulled out the original prescription form, the one Claire had torn, and handed it to a young girl in the crowd. "This paper changed everything," she said softly. The girl looked at it in awe. "Are you done now?" Lucia smiled. "No, just quieter." That evening, she boarded a small regional flight home. No press, no escorts, just her, a book, and a coach seat by the window. As the plane taxied, a young flight attendant walked past and did a double take. Then she stopped. "I just finished the Gate Grace module," she said nervously. "I didn't think I'd meet you in person." Lucia raised an eyebrow, half smiling. "How'd you score?" The attendant grinned. 94. Lucia nodded. "Next flight, aim for 100. You never know who you're serving." The plane took off into the fading dusk. Below her, the world looked like stitched lights and soft shadows. Behind her was chaos, conflict, noise. But ahead of her was quiet. And in that quiet, something rare was growing. Respect. The world didn't change overnight. It never does. But it changed. 7 months after Lucia Estrella walked out of the Brussels assembly, a quiet revolution was well underway. At JFK Airport, a new announcement played just before boarding. "This flight complies with Estrella Standards. Our crew is certified in dignity-based service. If something goes wrong, your voice matters." Passengers looked up. Some nodded, some smiled. A few even clapped. Not because it was perfect, but because it was finally different. In Denver, a 14-year-old boy with a rare blood condition boarded a domestic flight. His mother held a vial in her hands. When the agent asked about the liquid, she braced herself. But the attendant simply scanned the Gate Grace tag on the medication, nodded, and said, "You're all set. We've got a cooler on board just in case." The woman stared, stunned, then burst into quiet tears. "Thank you," she whispered. The agent only replied, "You can thank Lucia." In London, 2 airline executives sat in a boardroom reviewing the latest passenger trust reports. Their top scorer? A small East African airline no one had bet on. Why? They had adopted the Estrella whistle system in full, allowing even passengers to report misconduct during the flight in real time. Their CEO put it simply, respect is a policy now, not a favor. And back in the US, Naomi stood before a group of new recruits at the Federal Passenger Ethics Academy, a pilot training school that didn't even exist a year ago. She held a beat-up folder labeled Lucía Protocol in one hand, and her new copy of the Estrella Standards in the other. "Look," she said to the class of 22, "this isn't just about procedures. It's about power, the quiet kind, the kind that shows up when no one's looking and does the right thing anyway." They were listening, really listening. As for Lucia, she was living quietly in Portland. No speeches, no interviews, no foundation fundraisers, just community college classes, her local coffee shop, and walks by the river. She still had the scar on her arm where the IV line used to go. Still kept the torn prescription paper in a drawer. Still got letters from kids and some adults every week. She didn't always reply, but she read every word. One day, she got a message on her private email. No subject line. Just, "We're starting something new. Would you be willing to consult?" She didn't say yes, didn't say no either. Instead, she replied, "Only if the system listens harder than it speaks." The world didn't become perfect. There were still bad days, still bad people, still airline screw-ups. But now there was a line, a visible, public, enforceable line. Drawn not by a politician, not by a billionaire, but by a teenager in 27C, with an immune disorder, a quiet voice, and more backbone than most CEOs combined. And long after the headlines faded, Long after most forgot the exact details of what happened that day at 36,000 feet, they remembered the name, Lucía, not because she was famous, not because she sued, but because she didn't scream and still got the world to listen. If you were in Lucía's seat that day, what would you have done? Tell us in the comments. We're reading every story.